Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Fighting Moose podcast. I'm your host, Jason Hendrickson. This is a show where I retell stories that can be enjoyed by all ages, from the little babies in their cribs to the grandparents who are watching these babes. In today's episode, I will retell 4 Christmas stories. One is incredibly popular, and the others include some lesser known stories and legends. There will also be an expansion of an excerpt from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin. The Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in the hope that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled our brains for our long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer, now Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder, and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all! As dry leaves before the hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each tiny hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up in a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke encircled his head like a wreath. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Christmas at Fezziwigs Warehouse by Charles Dickens. "Yo-ho, my boys," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up," cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clap of his hands, before a man can say Jack Robinson. "Hilly-ho," cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. "Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick. Cheer up, Ebenezer. Clear away." There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away, with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off, as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see on a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book, and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Misses Fezziwig, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place, new top couple starting off again, as soon as they got there, all top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When this result was brought about, the fiddler struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Top couple 2, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them, 3 or 4 and 20 pairs of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been thrice as many, 4 times as many, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would become of them next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow in courtesy, corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again with a stagger. When the clock struck 11, the domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. Babouscka, a Russian legend. It was the night the dear Christ child came to Bethlehem. In a country far away from him, an old woman named Babouscka sat in her snug little house by her warm fire. The wind was drifting the snow outside and howling down the chimney, but it only made Babushka's fire burn more brightly. "How glad I am that I may stay indoors," said Babushka, holding her hands out to the bright blaze. But suddenly she heard a loud rap at her door. She opened it, and her candle shone on 3 old men standing outside in the snow. Their beards were as white as the snow, and so long that they reached the ground. Their eyes shone kindly in the light of Babushka's candle, and their arms were full of precious things, boxes of jewels, and sweet-smelling oils and ointments. "We have traveled far, Babushka," said they, "and we stop to tell you of the baby prince born this night in Bethlehem. He comes to rule the world and teach all men to be loving and true. We carry him gifts. Come with us, Babushka." But Babushka looked at the driving snow, and then inside at her cozy room and the crackling fire. "It is too late for me to go with you, good sirs," she said. "The weather is too cold." She went inside again and shut the door, and the old men journeyed on to Bethlehem without her. But as Babushka sat by her fire, rocking, she began to think about the little Christ child, for she loved all babies. "Tomorrow I will go find him," she said. "Tomorrow, when it is light, and I will carry him some toys." So when it was morning, Babushka put on her long cloak and took her staff and filled a basket with the pretty things a baby would like, gold balls and wooden toys, and strings of silver cobwebs, and she set out to find the Christ child. But oh, Babushka had forgotten to ask the 3 old men the road to Bethlehem, and they had traveled so far through the night that she could not overtake them. Up and down the roads she hurried, through woods and fields and towns, saying to whomsoever she met, "I go to find the Christ child. Where does he lie? I bring some pretty toys for his sake." But no one could tell her the way to go, and they all said, "Farther on, Babushka, farther on." So she traveled on and on and on for years and years, but she never found the little Christ child. They say that old Babushka is traveling still, looking for him. When it comes Christmas Eve, and the children are lying fast asleep, Babushka comes softly, looking through the snowy fields and towns, wrapped in her long cloak and carrying her basket on her arm. With her staff, she raps gently at the doors and goes inside and holds her candle close to the little children's faces. "Is he here?" she asks. "Is the little Christ child here?" And then she turns sorrowfully away again, crying, "Farther on, farther on." But before she leaves, she takes a toy from her basket and lays it beside the pillow for a Christmas gift. "For his sake," she says softly, and then hurries on through the years and forever in search of the little Christ child. The night after Christmas. 'Twas the night after Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, excepting a mouse. The stockings were flung in haste over the chair, for hopes of St. Nicholas were no longer there. The children were restlessly tossing in bed, for the pie and the candy were heavy as lead. While Mamma in her kerchief and I in my gown had just made up our minds that we would not lie down. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my chair to see what was the matter. Away to the window I went with a dash, flung open the shutter and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the luster of noonday to objects below. When what to my long, anxious eye should appear but a horse and a sleigh, both old-fashioned and queer. With a little old driver, so solemn and slow, I knew at a glance it must be Dr. Bro. I drew in my head and was turning around when upstairs came the doctor with scarcely a sound. He wore a thick overcoat made long ago, and the beard on his chin was white with the snow. He spoke a few words and went straight to his work. He felt all the pulses, then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose, with a nod of his head to the chimney he goes. "A spoonful of oil, ma'am, if you have it handy. No nuts and no raisins, no pies and no candy. These tender young stomachs cannot well digest all the sweets that they get. Toys and books are the best. But I know my advice will not find many friends, for the custom of Christmas the other way tends. The fathers and mothers and Santa Claus too are exceedingly blind. Well, good night to you." And I heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight, "These feastings and candies make doctors' bills right." Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Fighting Moose podcast. Please join us next time as we read a story about Santa's first journey. Today's music was provided by the Edison Concert Band. For more information, to listen to and or download materials, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com. As always, remember to do a random act of kindness.